Now that I've successfully completed my first run of Fire Emblem Engage Maddening, including all of the DLC waves and the Fells analog, I wanted to go through and talk about how my team worked out. I did a lot of weird things with this run, tried out a lot of strange builds, and most of them worked out better than I expected them to, honestly, and I'm quite happy with them. We'll probably use them again in the future. But there are also some that didn't work out so well, and some characters that just didn't even get the chance to be at their full potential. They just kind of fell off the team in favor of other characters. So I want to talk about all three of those categories so that you know what you might want to try in your future Maddening runs. Let's begin. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. If you enjoy what I do, you want to give me a hand, show me some support, especially right now while ad revenue is kind of shaky because I've been very caught up in real life things. A like, a sub would be very much appreciated. And if you have the capability, a YouTube membership, or joining as a patron would be massively helpful. It's been a rough month or two in my life here with my family and stuff, and the support from you all has been absolutely vital to my continued life on YouTube. So if you could consider those things, that'd be great. Thank you. Sorry for the slightly longer intro this time around. But yes, today I want to talk about what worked, what didn't, and what I'm happy with, not so happy with my Maddening team. I might break this up into two parts because there are a lot of characters to go through. I'm not going to be going in depth on these builds. I have some characters that I do want to do dedicated build guides for. But right now I just want to kind of do a roundup, see where we're at, see how things have landed and how we're feeling about it. So we're just going to take it right from the top, go down the list, and I'll give my thoughts as we go. I might edit around, maybe break things up by category, but we'll see. We'll see how I decide to do it. So first of all, we have Alear, and this was one of the very first odd things that I decided to do in this run, and I'm so happy that I did. This is my support Alear. He started off in Martial Master after we first, reclassed him from his base class, and then he landed in High Priest, and I gotta say, man, having a guaranteed, dedicated, powerful support unit like this from basically the start of the game, or at least the start of the most difficult content in Maddening once you get past the first few chapters, was awesome. I have been so happy with Alear in this run. His stats, of course, work out perfectly. He's a main character unit, and typically they can do a bit of whatever you want them to do. But the whole idea here was that I wanted to make the best use possible of Divinely Inspiring. Adjacent allies deal +3 damage, take 1 less damage. You should all be familiar with this by now, of course. And having a character that was already going to be in the backlines, healing, providing support, maybe throwing some magic around depending on the class that you have them in, makes it way easier to make use of Divinely Inspiring. And on Maddening, where enemies are very fast, have very high defenses, you're going to want to be able to eke out as much damage as you can wherever you can. And since Divinely Inspiring allows you to punch through damage, even if, say, your character is going to deal 0 damage because their attack is lower than the enemy's defense. Cool, whatever. Divinely Inspiring is still a guaranteed 3 damage. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but there are a lot of circumstances where that actually becomes not just useful, but vital. But then the most important things here, I had Canter, of course, being able to move after acting, very important. Can heal, move into position to provide the most support possible. Divinely Inspiring, very nice. And Staff Mastery 3, just getting extra hit with our status effect staves, healing for more with our healing staves. If you have a dedicated healer unit, one of their 2 skills should probably be Staff Mastery. Then once I unlocked her, I did land on Veronica for Alear, and people were saying that this is not just not optimal, but wasteful, but I disagree, man. I absolutely disagree. Alear is already a powerful support unit on his own, but then when I really need to kick it into high gear, and I can have these giant Fortify Plus casts that are going to heal everyone in a radius, heal for more because I've got Staff Mastery, remove status effects. We can attack from range with the staff if we need to make sure we don't get counterattacked. We can attack with a book to deal more damage if we need to. It's good, man. And that's to say nothing of the skills that we have available to us. Book of Worlds, you don't need to be healing or taking actions with your support unit every turn, so you can stack up Book of Worlds pretty fast. Level boost, having just a little bit of a boost to your stats when you kill a couple units is very nice. It's like We're not a combat unit. Sometimes you need a little bit of an extra oomph to be able to actually deal any damage, so having level boost, very nice for that. SP conversion didn't wind up really being useful for me because this is a fairly cheap build to get online. Canter doesn't cost that much, and neither does Staff Mastery, so I didn't need the SP here, and by the time we got it unlocked with Veronica, we already had our build pretty much locked in. You can see I'm sitting on a bunch of SP I just didn't have the time to use during the run, so not the most useful thing. Could be more useful on another character, sure, but I mean, it's fine. And then Contract, being able to grant allies extra actions. Again, if you don't need to heal with your support unit, the least you can do is give your big frontline beater more damage. And, of course, being able to summon heroes. I'm always happy to do this. I'm always happy to do this with Alear. We can park Alear in a position where he's going to be able to give extra damage to our allies. We can summon a hero, get it out there to deal the damage for Alear. It works out perfectly. It absolutely works out phenomenally. Highly recommend this if you haven't done a support Alear build and you're going to be doing a new run at some point in the future of Engage. Highly, highly, highly recommend checking this out. Oh, and I did want to say really quick before we move on to our next character, if you don't have the DLC or you don't want to use the DLC, of course, you don't need to use Veronica here. Any of your other support emblems will be good on this build. Your Micaiahs, your Byleths, even your Corrins could be pretty good here. But I do think there's a case to be made for Celica as well. Because, I mean, yes, she's a very good damage-dealing unit, but she does also use staves, and the magic boost on this build, having extra damage when you do need to attack, could be nice. So there are options there if you don't feel like using the DLC or you don't have the DLC. Figured I'd throw that in there. Moving on to Gregory, speaking of DLC characters, Greg wound up being my second primary support unit. I had some other units that were able to do some stuff in terms of supporting, but Greg was really in here with the heals alongside Alear, and that's good. I think you do kind of want two dedicated staff units in Maddening just because there's so much damage that can fly around. Of course, Gregory is a DLC unit. If you don't have the DLC waves, you're doing a run without them, then, I mean, this isn't going to be pertinent for you, but Greg is a very nice unit. He comes in as a Sage, but I already had a Sage, and a good one at that, who fulfilled a similar role to the way Gregory starts off with his high magic and high res and not a whole lot of anything else. So I decided to change things up, and I figured Griffin Knight would be a good place to land, because I hadn't really used Griffin Knights, and it seems like they would make good use of the stats that Gregory is good in, while slightly bolstering the stats that he really flags in. So let's go through what we had here. We, of course, have Greg's survival plan, gives him extra avoid when there's any or multiple enemies nearby, which the frontline sort of ish unit like Griffin Knight, very nice. Clear the way from Griffin Knight, making it so that allies have movement 1 through adjacent spaces. Can be useful when you've got a lot of nasty terrain, snow levels, forests, stuff like that. Situational, but when it's nice, it's nice. And then our abilities were very simple here. I didn't really need Greg to have a lot as a dedicated support unit. I gave him Magic and Dex +2 because his dexterity is quite bad, and I'd like him to be able to actually hit with some level of regularity when he's getting out there and attacking. So, and getting a magic boost, obviously very nice when you have staves going around. I have him with 11 sword. We'll talk about that in a moment, so we're dealing more damage with that. Very good stuff. Staff Mastery 3, much like with Alear. Again, more hit, more healing. It's good stuff. And then Greg was my dedicated Micaiah support bot here. Obviously, if I didn't have DLC stuff, this would probably be on Alear once we got Micaiah back. But having a Griffin Knight, who's also my rewarp bomb unit, was really nice. Very easy for him to get into position. Very easy for him to maneuver around, move through the enemy and ally formations, and be where I need him to be so that we can then warp onto the enemy. Thanks to his survival plan and the overall good stats from Griffin Knight as well. Not really looking at getting blown up when he rewarp bombs into the enemy. It's kind of an issue that you can run into. It's like, cool, I warped into the enemy group with my strongest units, and they're out there and they're slaying out whatever, but my squishy staff bot is now in the middle of the enemy formation and can't defend themselves. So if I don't kill literally everything in the enemy formation by the enemy phase, they're probably going to blow up. Less likely here, which is very nice. All the stuff that we get from having Micaiah as well is awesome. Having Cleric ++, making it so we can use better staves. Griffin Knights don't have great staff rank. I believe it's C most of the time. So having this to go up to A, very good. Allows him to use more staves he would not otherwise be able to. Healing Light, being able to heal himself when he heals allies, very good. Again, he is seeing combat, so he will have damage on him more often than not. Silence Ward, so I can guarantee that I'm always going to be able to rewarp around, use status staves, use healing, always very good. Augment, obviously giving us more range with our staves is very, very nice. It's the only reason that Rewarp Bomb works. And then, of course, Great Sacrifice is one of the best engaged skills in the game. As far as the weapons that we were using, I did just land on 11 Sword plus 2. Doesn't have good strength. Just doesn't. Not going to be dealing damage with physical swords. But his magic, very, very nice. And 11 Sword is actually pretty good in this game. So I settled on that, have a ranged option, still be able to deal magic damage, very nice. And then again, the same array of staves basically that Alear would have. I was very happy with this build. I think that it's another very solid contender. This is the only build I've run on Greg, because this is the only run that I've done with the DLC, the Fel's Analog. So there's a lot of experimentation to do, I feel, with him. But if you're looking for a way to use him and you don't want to keep him in his base Sage class, Griffin Knight is definitely a solid choice. It's definitely something I would recommend in the future. Moving on, it's Jean. This is the lad himself, and definitely one of the characters that I'm planning on doing a full build guide for, because, man, this build with Jean, absolute standout MVP, like top 3 in this run. So what's going on here? This is Jean the Plague Doctor. Without getting too deep into it, the idea here is that Jean is so fast, he's so dodgy, that he can afford to be on the front lines with a knife, poisoning enemies, and more likely than not, like 9 times out of 10, not taking a single hit in the process. To facilitate this, we gave him Lucina, so that he becomes a backup unit and is always guaranteed to be able to back up allies around him, and with Dual Assist Plus, has a 70% chance to back up anyone else who's within his move and attack range, which is wild. This started off as a Wolf Knight build for maximum range and the ability to wield knives. Once the Fel's Analog came out, we did wind up switching him over to Enchanter to give him even more support capabilities. And I mean, I just cannot recommend this build enough. This comes to us from the Incompletionist, a community member of mine who recommended it to me after he theory crafted it. And yeah, I mean, if you haven't run Jean in this build, then you're missing out, man. You're missing out. We gave him a Steel Dagger +4 with the Micaiah engrave on it for maximum levels of avoid. Due to the way Maddening is with the high hit of enemies, they are still likely to target him, but only just. He's most of the time had like an 8 to 15% chance to dodge any incoming attack, which was insane. And that's not factoring in like terrain. That was just Jean and his raw stats and his dagger having plus avoid on it. It was wild. And he's dealing just enough damage most of the time that he's able to push poison through, even just when he's attacking. I very rarely actually used any of his engage weapons with Lucina. I pretty much wanted him on his knife 24/7 so that he could get maximum avoid and be poisoning stuff. But having the effectiveness with the different swords, or having the Parthia for extra XP and flying damage, was situationally useful. It wasn't the most important thing, though. Not by a long shot. Of course, Jean's expertise is one of the main reasons that we like using him, because it gives him extra stats on level up. His bases aren't great, as these units typically are not, but with the amount of XP he earned along the way, due to how dodgy he was and how many attacks he was able to get in, really allowed expertise to shine here. As an Enchanter, having access to the Convoy is obviously insanely strong. Having more than one unit who can give Convoy access to themselves and others is phenomenal. It really lets you stay versatile out on the battlefield. We did leave him with Cantor, primarily said he could attack and then move even further into the enemy formation if he had already moved his max move range, so that we would be able to make sure that he had as much targeting capability as possible with his Dual Assist Plus attacks. I did wind up giving him Rally Spectrum as well. We didn't get up to plus, but I figured sometimes there's just going to be a time where I can't attack on Jean's turn with him and be able to actually do anything effective. This way, he can move up, buff his surrounding allies, still be in range to trigger his backup attacks, and we'll all be golden. Then, of course, we have the normal suite of Lucina stuff. Dual Strike, giving us chain attacks as if we were a backup unit, is the bread and butter of this build. If you didn't know, you haven't seen my other videos talking about this build and the builds I was using. Backup attacks trigger poison. Backup attacks are guaranteed to deal at least 1 point of damage because they deal 10% of the target's maximum HP flat. So if you land that backup, you're getting 1 stack of poison on the enemy, and that's huge. Dual Assist Plus, making it so that we attack any enemies within our move and attack range, again, is insanely strong. 70% is a lot, and we saw a lot of extra damage from Jean. He might have dealt some of the highest damage over the course of the entire campaign just because he got so many backup attacks. It was insane. Like, if he's in range of an ally and they attack, he's likely to be attacking with them, and that stacks up real fast. Dual Support, getting bonuses to Avoid that increase with unit support level with adjacent allies. Again, massively boosts our Avoid here. A lot of the time, Jean was kind of in the scrub, nipping at the enemy's heels, so he didn't have a lot of allies around him, but when I needed him to stand in the front line and dodge tank, Dual Support was a huge bonus for that. Bonded Shield. This is the good one. This is where it is. Bonded Shield is insanely busted, used to prevent first attacks on adjacent allies until your next turn with a trigger percent of 80, except for the fact that the Enchanter class is a Chi Adept class, which makes the trigger percent 100%. Another reason to switch from Wolf Knight to Enchanter if you have the DLC and you are using stuff from it, because, hey, sometimes there's just too many enemies coming at you. You have to be able to cover your allies. Jean can do that for you pretty handily. And then, of course, All for One. I very rarely use this. Again, can't use your dagger with this. You have to use a sword. And Jean's not dodging nearly as well if he's not using his dagger. And I want to be out here poisoning, typically not dealing damage. So I very rarely used All for One. Sometimes it came in handy, but I very rarely used it. Overall, though, just this build is phenomenal. We're not even getting into the things that Enchanter can do. I don't think we really need to. It's just a cherry on top, but any class that you can use Jean in where he's using daggers with Lucina, he's going to be a powerhouse for it. If you don't want to use the DLC, again, you don't have the DLC, anything like that, Wolf Knight will work almost as well for you. You won't have quite as much good stuff going on with Bonded Shield, but you'll have more move range, you'll have more damage overall. It's a very, very strong option. But if you have the DLC, don't have a dedicated Enchanter, or you just want to try it out, I highly, 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 highly recommend this little Chemist Plague Doctor in training. Very, very strong. Moving on from there, we had Alcryst with Lyn, and this is a very standard build. From everything that I've seen, I've had a lot of people tell me that this is very strong, and I totally understand why. And it was very strong. However, I will say, of all of my characters that I was using and was really happy with, Alcryst is probably the one that fell off the most for me by the end game, and it's because he just could not get the damage output that I needed him to have. So let's talk about what we had going on here. Alcryst and Lyn is an insanely strong option. He's in his... I'm not going to be able to pronounce this. I've never been able to. Terror de Elite. I'm sure I butchered that. Anyone who knows proper French can, butcher me in the comments for butchering that. But very strong. Very strong class. Basically, he's just sniper, but better, as the royal classes tend to be. X-class, but better. Gives him Luna, one of the best skills in the game. Always a strong contender in Fire Emblem games. And Alcryst was just reliable, man. Fast, accurate, able to pick off targets that I need him to. Lyn is probably one of the best emblems in the game as well. Being able to get the guaranteed backup attacks from clones. Being able to snipe things from insane ranges with 20 range Astra Storm. Very, very good. The issue is that by endgame, his strength just was not keeping up. You can see I did wind up putting strength +2 on him. I wanted to get more. I just didn't have the bond fragments to get him the levels with Roy that I needed. There's no bow power. There's only strength up. And even then, I had a real hard time getting Alcryst to kill stuff. Even on flying enemies that he had effectiveness damage against, with Lyn's very powerful bows when he's engaged, all that type of stuff, he had a rough time, man. He really did. And yes, there are definitely things that I could have done to increase his damage output further. I could have upgraded his silver bow more. I could have upgraded his steel bow more. But I didn't really have the resources. And that became a problem. I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of times where I found myself begging Alcryst to trigger Luna because it was the only way that he was going to be able to kill something. And, I mean, he's got a lot of dex. Don't get me wrong. Being able to ignore half of a foe's defense and res on a dex trigger percentage when you have 43 dex is a lot. But it's still not even 50%. So you're still losing out more often than not on the coin flip. And that definitely came around to bite me. That's one of the reasons that I wound up putting Draconic Hex on Alcryst. If unit initiates combat, inflicts -4 to all of foes' basic stats after combat. This is becoming one of my favorite skills in the game because it just has so much utility. And when we couldn't kill something with Alcryst, at least we were able to snipe it, deal hopefully some damage, put a Draconic Hex on it, make it easier for some of my other units to clean it up, or on the next turn, assuming Alcryst survived whatever it was that he was fighting, make it easier for him to bring it down on the following turn. Because he was paired up with Lyn, we did have access to all sorts of fun stuff like Alacrity++. Initiates combat with a speed advantage of 5 or more. Our follow-up occurs before foe can counterattack. Well, let me tell you, when you've got 36 speed, even on Maddening, you're outspeeding most stuff, and you're triggering Alacrity a lot. Then, of course, we did have Speed Taker from having Lyn equipped, so, you know, again, that's 36 speed base, plus potentially another 10 more. I mean, Alacrity's proccing all the time from that. Call doubles, Astral Storm, I mean, this is awesome. Of course, these are very, very strong skills with Lyn. And being a covert unit, getting range plus 10 with this means that I was very reliably able to count on Alcryst to snipe down something that was big when I needed him to. And each of these arrows can individually trigger Luna as well. So, very strong build, don't get me wrong. But I want to try a similar build with other archers, I think. I'm happy with Luna. I'm happy with Alchryst's speed. But man, his damage output was lacking. So, I'm open to suggestions in the comments, of course, on how to make this a stronger build. It's not bad, but it definitely will stop serving you as well by the end game. And I do think that's a problem. So, I would say this is a solidly mid-category build in terms of the overall stuff that I had going on. Fun, useful, not the best. Moving on to the cream of the crop, the king of the hill, the brave king himself. It's BOUCHERON, and let me tell you, if Jean was in the top 3, you know BOUCHERON is in the top 3. Brave King BOUCHERON is a conjuration of my own mind, and man, I have gotten some smack talk from people, some back talk from people, some people telling me this is one of the worst characters in the game, people telling me that this is a character that falls off. You've heard that one a lot. Takes too much investment, the opportunity cost is bad, etc., etc., etc. Well, I am here to tell all of you that you are all wrong. You shall not slight the name of the brave king anymore in my presence, because this lad is my king and your king. He's the brave king, BOUCHERON. BOUCHERON is the MVP of this run. Let's talk about why this lad is such an absolute unit. Okay, I've talked about this build before. We're not going to go into all the nitty-gritty, but man, I need to highlight why it is so good. Going through. First of all, Brave Sword +3. Big damage. Marth Emblem. Big damage. You look at our speed, our strength. 32 strength, 35 dexterity, 36 speed. People told me that BOUCHERON would not be able to double against the enemy, and let me tell you how wrong you are. This man had quads. This man had sextuple attacks. This man had octuple attacks. He was ridiculous. He was out here slaying left, right, and center. He was playing bongos with Sombron's damn head in the final map, and that was before we'd even killed all the Dark Emblems. He is ridiculous. BOUCHERON is a man. BOUCHERON is the man. I cannot emphasize enough how ridiculously good this build is. Why is it so good? So, the idea came in from Move to Tears. When an ally joins a chain attack in this unit's combat, unit deals +2 damage. Period. Flat. That's per attack. So I figured, how can we maximize on that? Lean into a Brave build. Slap a Brave Sword, or a Brave Axe, or a Brave Lance, or whatever you want on BOUCHERON. He has good speed. He's got good build. He can more likely than not quad, and that's going to mean that when he's being backed up, which is very easy to do, he's guaranteed getting +8 damage right off the bat, completely discounting whatever other damage he's dealing with his Brave weapon. And he's got pretty good strength. BOUCHERON is weird. As an axe fighter, he doesn't have the stats that you would expect him to have, but he's got good stats that you can absolutely lean into with the right build, and this is that build. Being a hero gives him Brave Assist. If unit's HP is at max while unit makes a chain attack, unit attacks twice. Insanely strong. getting double the backup attacks is so good. And of course, we gave him dual assist plus. So with Boucheron and Jean out there on the front line, I was easily getting 3 free backup attacks on the regular, regardless of what unit I had attacking. It was insane. Super strong. Then, of course, we have Sword Power 5. I will fully admit, when I first was establishing this build on the channel, people had talked about how getting to higher levels of sword power was going to be nigh impossible because SP was so hard to come by. You are absolutely correct on that. 100%. I was still able to get up to like sword power 2 or 3. That wasn't that hard. It was a dedicated, focused build. It used all of his SP, but we got there. And it worked out very well. However, then, in all of their infinite wisdom, intelligence systems granted to us the well. And suddenly SP isn't a problem anymore. You can get so many SP books out of the well. You can make these builds happen in a way that feels so much better. It feels more like a system that you can engage, notch, with. So we're at Sword Power 5. Grants attack plus 10 at a cost of Void minus 10 when using a sword. Well, let me tell you, attack plus 10 with a Brave Sword, that's essentially 40 extra free damage when you're swinging out there with a quad with that Brave Sword. Then, of course, we have our Dual Assist Plus, as we already talked about. And then this is where things get interesting, because the Brave King build is absolutely functional whether you have the DLC or not. Right now, Boucheron is equipped with Marth. This is who I started him with at the very start of the game. He already came out swinging hard using Marth, and now he's even stronger. Perspective Plus, granting us a Void during combat. Void increases with high speed. Awesome. Makes it so that Boucheron's a lot more capable of survival on the front line, which is very important because his defense and res in this build are very not good. This is very much a glass cannon build. Break defenses. If units attack, breaks foe. Unit makes an extra attack at 50% damage. So, that Brave Sword. A lot of extra attacks we're looking at here. Unyielding Plus Plus. This very infrequently saw use, I will fully say. At start of player phase, if HP is 40% or less, restores 40% of units' max HP. It's very rare that Boucheron got that low and didn't die. More often than not, he was able to tank and survive stuff because of his high HP, or he was able to dodge stuff, whatever. But if we were low enough that we were triggering Unyielding, especially in late game Maddening, we were low enough that we were probably just dying. And that's not really a Boucheron specific issue. That's most not tanky units in Maddening mode, just because the enemies hit so hard and there's so many of them. So Unyielding Plus Plus was not the most useful thing around. I'll fully admit that, but it is what it is. Divine Speed, though. Unit performs an extra attack at 50% damage in combat. More attacks means more move to tears damage. More extra attacks from brave attacks. Again, cut back to the clip of us playing bongos on Sombron's big, stupid, flat, snaky head. There's a reason we were able to do that. And it's extremely funny. Then, of course, we have Lodestar Rush. Launch 7 consecutive sword attacks at 30% damage, adjacent foe only. And because we're a backup unit, we get +1 attack. I mean, it's just good. This is the boss killer right here. Ideally, I would have had a fully upgraded Silver Blade to make the most use of this attack. It's something I talked about in my initial Brave King Boucheron build video. But again, resources were tight. Maddening is tight on the resources, and there was another character that was using our only Silver Blade, and even then, wasn't upgraded. So, ideally, I would have liked to have had that, but is what it is. Is what it is. We were still able to make use of this pretty damn well. However, Marth is not what we were using the majority of the time with Boucheron here. Let's switch really quickly over here to Crom. This is what we were using the majority of the time. Crom, if you have the DLC, is disgusting with Boucheron. Let's quickly go through why. First of all, you get slightly better stats than you do with Marth. I believe it's 1 extra point of dex, which isn't a huge deal, but I mean, hey, every little bit counts. It's the skills that really come into play here. Surprise attack. If unit initiates combat from terrain that provides an avoid bonus, foe cannot counterattack. So now, you're attacking from a fort, a thicket. The Brave King gets 4, count them, 4 free attacks on an enemy. No risk of countering. You know what that leads to? Dead enemies, 9 times out of 10. Surprise attack is stupid with a Brave build. Rally Spectrum Plus, being able to give allies around us in 2 spaces, +3 to all 7 basic stats for a turn. This, I wound up using more than I would have expected to, honestly, just because sometimes you can't really get out there on the front line with any sort of glass cannon character. Enemies are just too accurate, there's too many of them, you'll get swarmed down, so you hang back, you buff up your frontliners, the characters that are going to be absorbing the brunt of the attack before you do your counter push. It's a good way to use what is otherwise a dedicated slaying machine and still have them contribute something to the fight. Brute Force came in surprisingly frequently. Our high dexterity means that we had more crits than I would have expected with BOUCHERON. This increases the damage that you deal with a crit from ×3 to ×4, and there were times that actually came through and helped us out a lot, so, and it's free. I mean, I'll take it. Charm, units attack, triggers a chain attack, increases chain attack accuracy to 90%. I mean, sounds good to me. The whole idea here is for BOUCHERON to be backing up his allies and for his allies to be backing him up so that he can get moved to tiers. And if we're just increasing chain attack accuracy to 90%, that means more of that damage is going to be going through more reliably. I'll take it. Sounds good. Other half, when unit initiates combat, Robin chain attacks, grants magic +10 while engaged. Guaranteed hit with chain attacks because we're a backup unit. I mean, again, we want our chain attacks to be accurate. We're going to be using them a lot. We want them to be landing more often than not, so making it a guaranteed hit is pretty good. And if BOUCHERON's out on the front line, there's no allies around to back him up, which is kind of rare when we have Jean, but, you know, being able to just engage and have a free backup with Robin to increase our damage, you can't beat it. You just can't beat it. Now, the Magic Plus was not useful at all here. As you can see, BOUCHERON has a big fat 0 in magic. Literally 0 magic. So even getting +10 is not the most useful thing, and that meant that our Levin Sword and Thoron and everything were not the most useful, and same thing goes for Giga Levin Sword. Used to attack with a magic sword, magic attack that uses physical attack power, swords only. Even though we were using physical attack power, this is kind of a lackluster weapon, or lackluster attack, I should say. 9 times out of 10, I would rather just be bongoing something with the Brave Sword than triggering Giga Levin Sword. There's situations where it's useful, like if you're next to Lucina and you can get some bonus stuff going on with that, but for the most part, I never really used this, and that's okay. That is okay, because we were still slaying out. So if you have the DLC, I highly recommend trying Chrom with the Brave King BOUCHERON build. If you don't have the DLC or you aren't using it in a run, Marth works just as well. And I'm not going to lie, I did use Marth in the last couple of chapters because I really needed boss damage more than I needed general ad slaying. And Marth is better at boss damage than Chrom is. Chrom is very good for fighting groups of enemies with surprise attack and things like that, but when you need to slay out on a boss, Marth is still the king. So I would say having the Hero King alongside the Brave King is a good way to go, but having the Hero Exalt also pretty good. And if you're down on BOUCHERON and you're down on your luck, consider trying him out. I guarantee if you actually try and build him, he will quickly become one of your favorite units. This man is a monster. I think I'm going to cut this one here for now, guys. They've gone through 5 characters, a little bit of a slower pace than I wanted to, but I really wanted to highlight what works and what doesn't with these builds so that y'all know what's good about them and what isn't. We're going to go through and do the rest of the roster. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11... 11 more units that we used regularly, and then a few more that I want to touch on that didn't get used very much. So I'll figure out how I want to cut these all together, but for now, I do think we're going to call this one here. If you have any suggestions or any comments about how maybe some of these builds could be tweaked, or if you had variations of them that you use that you very much enjoyed, let me know. I'm very happy with how this team has wound up, and I can't wait to talk about the rest of our units. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. I do very much appreciate it. Hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.